They walk into rooms, half convinced they do not belong there. Their hesitation speaks before they do. Even their energy feels restrained, as if it is waiting for permission to exist fully. Important decisions are delayed. Clear action is softened. They keep waiting for confidence, as if confidence is something the world hands out after approval. But that is not how power works. This is where most people go wrong. They treat certainty like a reward for success. They wait for proof before allowing themselves to move with conviction. They assume they must first be recognized before they are allowed to carry themselves with force. Stoicism destroys that lie. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That is the standard, not when you feel ready, not after the evidence appears. Now, the moment a man starts moving like the strongest version of himself, life begins answering him differently. His posture sharpens, his decisions become cleaner. Weakness stops feeling acceptable. That is not arrogance. It is the refusal to keep living beneath what you already know you could be. And once a man stops shrinking, stops delaying, and stops waiting for permission to carry himself with standard, something changes. He becomes more difficult to distract, more difficult to shake, much harder to match. That is what this video is about. Why people lose before life ever tests them. Why acting like the best is not ego, but self-respect. And why no one can rival a man who is fully aligned with himself. Most people lose before they begin. Most people do not fall apart in some dramatic moment. They lose quietly, long before that. The damage begins in private, in the hesitation nobody sees, in the opportunities they nearly take, then step back from, in the habit of stopping themselves just before life asks for full commitment. From the outside, it can look reasonable, thoughtful even. They tell themselves they are being careful, strategic, sensible, but a lot of the time, it is just fear in a more acceptable form, not always fear of failure. Sometimes it is fear of exposure, fear of being seen before they feel ready, fear of discovering that the person they imagine themselves to be has not yet been earned. So they live in a strange middle ground, close enough to ambition to think about it constantly, but never close enough to action for anything real to change. That is how people lose before they begin. Not because they are incapable, but because hesitation has slowly become part of their identity. And once that happens, life starts echoing it back. Their voice loses force, their decisions lose weight, their presence becomes easier to pass over. Then, one day, they look at their life and wonder why it never expanded. But life responds to the way you enter it. If you keep showing up divided, your actions will reflect that division. If you keep moving like someone who does not fully trust himself, your behavior will keep confirming that version of you. That is the real loss, not being defeated by another person, becoming loyal to the smaller self you should have outgrown. And once that becomes clear, the next question is unavoidable. If hesitation is stealing your life, what does real strength actually look like? Acting like the best is not arrogance. This is where many people misunderstand the whole idea. The moment they hear, "act like you are the best," they picture vanity, a man performing confidence, a man trying to dominate the room, because he needs everyone to feel his presence. But that is not strength. That is insecurity. Trying to look taller than it feels. Real strength is calmer than that. It does not need to announce itself every 5 minutes. It does not depend on being the loudest voice in the room. It has structure. To act like you are the best is not to place yourself above others. It is to stop treating your own standard like a suggestion. Your words become cleaner. Your choices become more deliberate. You waste less energy on habits that drag you downward. You stop making promises to yourself that you already plan to break. That is the real difference between ego and standard. Ego is preoccupied with image. Standard is preoccupied with conduct. One keeps asking how it looks. The other keeps asking whether the life is being lived properly. That is the kind of strength Stoicism respects. Not noise, not theater, not overcompensation, self-command. The kind that stays disciplined when comfort would be easier. The kind that does not shrink just because someone else is louder. The kind that moves with self-respect before the world offers recognition. That is not arrogance. It is alignment. And once you understand that, the title changes completely. Act like you are the best does not mean invent greatness. It means stop moving in ways that insult your potential. And the moment a man begins doing that, a deeper shift starts. He stops waiting for results to define him. Identity comes before results. This is where most people get trapped. They think life works in a simple sequence. First the results, then the confidence, then the identity. So they wait. They assume achievement will eventually give them permission to feel solid. They assume enough proof will finally turn them into the person they want to become. But it does not work that way. Identity comes first. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That line cuts through nearly every excuse because it demands a decision. Who are you choosing to be? Not later, not after the next victory, not once the world finally confirms it. Now. A disciplined person behaves with discipline before it feels natural. A focused person protects his attention before there is applause for it. A strong person learns to govern himself before life becomes convenient. That is why acting like the best matters. Because the questions begin to change. Instead of asking whether you feel ready, whether you might fail, whether people will judge you, whether you are enough yet, you start asking something far more useful. What does the strongest version of me do here? That single question changes posture, tone, and behavior. It raises your standard in real time. It makes self-betrayal harder to tolerate. The external results may still take time, but your direction becomes clear immediately. And once direction is clear, hesitation starts losing authority. Because now, you are not waiting to become someone. You are rehearsing someone. One choice at a time, one response at a time, one repeated act of alignment at a time. That is how identity is built. And the real test of that identity does not come when life is easy. It comes under pressure. Pressure reveals self-belief. Pressure does not create character, it reveals it. Put two people in the same difficult situation and watch what happens. One becomes scattered. He hesitates. He second-guesses. He overthinks every move. The pressure gets inside him and distorts what he is capable of. The other becomes clearer. Not because he feels nothing, not because fear disappears, but because he settled his identity. Before the pressure arrived, that is the difference. A man who believes he belongs carries himself differently before he even speaks. His posture is steadier, his pace is cleaner, His decisions come faster because his mind is not divided between action and insecurity. But the man who has not settled himself is fighting two battles at once: the challenge in front of him and the noise inside him. Do I belong here? What if I fail? What if they see weakness? What if I am not enough? That internal conflict destroys performance. Many people are not ruined by lack of skill. They are ruined by lack of permission from themselves. That is why this mindset matters so much. Acting like the best trains you to stop entering life like a question mark. You enter with composure. You enter with standard. You enter knowing that while you do not control every outcome, you absolutely control how you show up. That alone separates people more than talent often does. The world calls it confidence, but beneath confidence is something deeper. Self-belief built through repeated action, not fantasy, not self-delusion, not empty affirmations. Proof. The kind of proof that comes from watching yourself stay steady under discomfort. Often enough that you begin trusting your own response. And once that trust is there, something important changes. You stop needing perfect emotional conditions before you move. Repetition turns attitude into identity. At first, this way of moving will feel unnatural. You will speak more directly and notice tension. You will decide faster and feel resistance. You will carry yourself with more certainty, and part of you will wonder whether it is forced. That is normal. Most people fail here because they misread discomfort. They assume awkwardness means the change is false. They think resistance is proof that the new standard does not belong to them. But growth does not work that way. What feels foreign at the beginning often becomes natural through repetition, not because it was fake, but because it was unfamiliar. The first disciplined act always comes with friction. Holding your reaction instead of obeying it has friction. Following through without bargaining with yourself has friction. Carrying a higher standard before it feels fully comfortable has friction. That friction is not a warning. It is part of the process, because repetition changes the meaning of effort. What once felt forced begins to settle. What once demanded full awareness starts becoming instinct. What once looked like correction slowly becomes the way you move. That is how transformation actually happens. Not in one breakthrough, not in one intense night of motivation, through repeated alignment between what you value and how you behave. You keep your word. You return to clarity. You refuse old weakness, another place to live. And each time you do that, you send yourself evidence. This is becoming my nature. That is when identity starts to shift. Eventually, discipline no longer feels like performance. It feels like structure. You do not need to keep talking yourself into standard. You simply move. Composure no longer requires a speech. It is already there. Acting like the best stops being a concept and becomes visible in your conduct. That is when the title becomes real, because no one can easily match a person whose discipline no longer depends on motivation. No one can match someone who is fully aligned. Now we get to the deepest part. No one can match you does not mean becoming louder, more admired, or more aggressive than everyone else. It means becoming difficult to rival because there is no inner split in the way you live. A fully aligned man is not performing. There is no gap between what he says matters and how he actually moves. His progress is not constantly being undone by his own inconsistency. That is what makes him powerful. Most people live in contradiction. They want the reward, but resist the structure behind it. They crave confidence, yet avoid the repeated effort that creates it. They talk about standards, then abandon them the moment discomfort appears. So, their energy never gathers force. It gets scattered, pulled apart by mood, distraction, and the habit of breaking their own word. An aligned man moves with far less friction inside himself. He is not waking up every morning renegotiating whether he will honor his values. That argument is over. He does not need constant encouragement to keep going, and slow progress does not knock him off his path. He continues. That is what makes him rare. The world has no shortage of talent, opinions, or potential. What it lacks is people whose inner life is ordered enough to hold a standard over time. That is why someone fully aligned becomes hard to match. Not because he's perfect, not because life stops testing him, but because he's no longer built on unstable things. He does not depend on applause to feel real. He does not need comparison to feel significant. He's standing on something deeper, standard. And once a man is built that way, the next question becomes unavoidable. What destroys that strength faster than anything else? Not failure, self-betrayal. Stop breaking your own standard. Most people think their biggest problem is outside themselves. They blame their surroundings, their timing, the people around them, or the chance they never got. And yes, those things matter. But very often, the deepest damage is self-inflicted. It happens every time you make a promise to yourself and ignore it. Every time you say tomorrow, while already knowing you do not mean it. Every time you stay silent when you should speak. Every time you choose comfort over the standard you claim to respect. That is how self-respect erodes. Not in one collapse, in repeated small betrayals. And this is why acting like the best matters so much, because it forces honesty. You cannot claim greatness in your mind while living carelessly in your actions. You cannot expect confidence while collecting evidence of your own inconsistency. You cannot move powerfully through life if deep down you know your own word means very little to you. Stoicism demands clarity, not self-hatred, not punishment for the sake of pain. Clarity. Where am I weak? Where am I undisciplined? Where do I keep escaping into comfort? Where have I accepted less than what I know I am capable of? Those questions matter, because once the pattern is visible, it becomes actionable. Once you see the pattern clearly, you can interrupt it, challenge it, and stop giving it more power. And every time you stop betraying your own standard, something returns. Self-trust. That quiet certainty that says, when the moment comes, I already know how I will show up. There are few things more powerful than that. And once self-trust returns, you stop needing the world to convince you that you are ready. In the end, this is not about pretending to be greater than everyone else. It is about refusing to remain below your own standard. A man changes the moment he stops moving like someone waiting to be chosen. The moment he stops speaking as if he needs permission to exist fully. The moment he stops shrinking in situations that were meant to reveal his strength. That is what it means to act like the best. Not to impress the world, not to create an image, but to stop betraying what you already know you could become. And once that decision is real, life begins to answer it. Your thinking clears, your actions carry more weight. Your presence starts to feel different, even before you say a word. That is why someone fully aligned becomes difficult to match. Not because he's trying to outshine everyone around him, but because most people are still divided within themselves. Their values pull one way, their habits another, and their fear keeps interrupting both. But when your mind, your conduct, and your standard begin moving together, something solid forms. you become quieter inside, less easily shaken, less available for distraction, far more difficult to stop. So, do not wait to feel like that man first. Move like him now, because the version of you that deserves your respect will never be built in theory. It will be built in the choices you make once this video ends. And if this message spoke to you, do not let it become another truth you admire for a moment and then abandon. Subscribe to Stoic Mindset. Stay on this path and watch the next video on your screen. Because this way of living is not built by hearing the truth once. It is built by returning to it until it becomes the way you move.